Hello, today I want to spend some time talking about estimating. And we need to start off by understanding where we are in the professional services life cycle and explaining that the estimating process is not something that happens just here in the business development phase, especially in services organizations. There is something called the cone of uncertainty. And so, what I want to do today is I want to walk you through the cone of uncertainty and explain what the different variables are and some of the examples of how I've seen this done in different organizations and how we've done this within our own organization. And so I want to start off with the concept of a ROM, which is also considered a rough order of magnitude. And the sample that I like to use here is the housing industry. Now, in the housing industry, if you decide that you want a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in a certain area, they're going to say starting at the 300,000s or whatever it is in your area. This is a rough order of magnitude. It is a number that could swing 50% in either direction. If you want the base model, it could be significantly less. If you pick the creme de la creme with all of the options, it is going to be the highest. But you've had to give very little information about what it is you're looking for, and the service provider has been able to say, this is the range in which you can expect. This happens all of the time on projects where somebody says, just give me a ballpark estimate. The next step is really a budgetary number. And so I want to show you an example of one of the best budgetary examples that I have seen. And it is this company called Precision Restoration. They actually provide, as part of their sales and onboarding process, a document that explains what they do and how they do it. And they say that this is a rough planning guide only, but it breaks down. Here are kind of the big steps and the big stages, and then here are the potential price ranges. So now you as a consumer could look at this and you can make some decisions about what the things are that you think need to be done, and you can at least get a budgetary number in your head. So I think that's a beautiful model of a budgetary number. The next stage would be where you would get down to a proposal. And so a proposal would say, we've talked to you enough, we've gathered some level of information, and based on what you're telling us, this is how we would approach it, and this is the number we think that it might be. And then you can get all the way down to a statement of work, which is the details about who's going to do it, how are they going to do it, when are they going to do it, based on what we know in that moment. And then we'll go into some sort of a discovery or an elaboration phase where we'll probably figure out more details. The more details we figure out, there may need to be change request, and we'll actually go into the build phase, and there will actually be change requests along the way potentially. We don't know what the final price is until we actually get to the very end of the project. So this is the cone of uncertainty, and in estimating, it really is how much effort do you need to put in as the service provider in terms of gathering information, and what the level of risk is starts to decrease the closer you get to actually executing and delivering the project. Now, we have all experienced where we give a budgetary number and we get locked into that number because we are setting the expectation in the client's mind. And so again, you as an organization are going to have to understand in your sales process which of these are you giving to your client, and make it very clear. So I want to show you a couple of examples of ways we have done some estimating. And again, this will really depend on your organizational maturity. But I have seen everything as simple as somebody puts together a spreadsheet that says, all right, in the initial phase, I know that I need to do some understanding of what the configurations and thinking about what that might look like. And I know kind of what resources I need and how many hours it might take. And we can then add those up to make some decisions. I have seen to a much greater detail where they actually have what's called a work breakdown structure. And this is a template. So when you're getting to the point that you're doing the same projects over and over again, I really like having a template that says, we know we always have these tasks. When we're doing requirements gathering, we need to get samples, we need to document, we need to come up with test cases, or how are we going to communicate? And when we're building it, what are the things we're going to actually need to build out? Now, this level of detail I don't do in the budgetary phase. I really wait until we get closer to the proposal or even the statement of work phase. And one of the biggest problems has been getting the people who are going to do the work to be involved and engaged at this stage, because they're the ones that have to buy into this plan, because this will eventually drive into their project plan and how they are expected to execute. And at the end of the project, the measure to which we did what we said we were going to do. And so I want to introduce the concept of PERT. Some of you have heard of this before, some of you have not. But what I like to do is I like to put optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic. And then I have the ability here to write out any assumptions that are included in my thinking at the time that I'm developing this. And this just really protects you as the service provider. And what this does is that instead of having to get locked into a particular number, it allows you to expand your thinking. So let's say I know that one of the things I'm going to have to do is to document the requirements so that I can put those into a statement of work. And if this is a really simple project and there aren't a whole lot of requirements, that might only take a half an hour. But I don't know yet, because I haven't really engaged with the client enough to know what that looks like. I do know from previous projects that typically it takes me about an hour to do that. And on clients that have a ton of requirements, or they're super difficult, or they want to ask a lot of questions and need a lot of coaching and consulting, it can take up to 4 hours sometimes. So this has allowed me to say a pretty broad spread here. But from an estimating perspective, what it does is there's a formula. Here's the formula I'm going to share with you. So you're going to take the most likely times 4. This is going to give you a weighted average, because it's most likely going to be the most likely, or at least close to that. But you're going to add the outliers of the optimistic, and you're going to add the outliers of the pessimistic, and then you're going to divide by 6. So what this does is it gives you the weighted average. And then when you add all of these up, or when you get to the end of this, you can actually total everything down here. And so now, instead of giving your client a particular estimate that says, it's going to be exactly 10 hours worth of work, instead you're going to say, if everything went great, it would be 9 hours. And if everything went horrible, it would be 41 hours. So that would be a great way to give the proposal estimate, right? So, hey, there's a lot of things we don't know yet. It could range somewhere between here and there. But you could also say, based on what we know and our averages, it's probably most likely going to be somewhere in the 20-hour range. By doing your estimate this way, the other thing that you can do is you can just pick, again, if you're early on, you might just want to pick a generic hourly rate or sort of a blended hourly rate. But if you're in more of the statement of work phase, where you're starting to develop who's going to actually do this work, and you're getting into more of the details, now you can go through and you can start to say, these are the people that I'm going to assign to these projects, and these are their different rates. So here I have actually calculated basically the services estimate based on everybody's rate, or here I can look at it and I can say, okay, this is a blended rate. So this just gives you a lot of information and a lot of detail in terms of how you're going to communicate to the client. And again, organizationally, you have to decide which numbers. Do you want to use blended rates? Do you want to use more detailed rates? And all of that's really going to be dependent on where you are in this overall life cycle. But defining that, working with the team so that everybody knows it's okay to give a budgetary number as long as we caveat it as such, isn't going to lock us in. And that really comes a lot to do with the communications that you have with the customer as well. For organizations that are quite a bit more mature, or organizations that do something fairly similar over and over again, I love getting to the point of creating an estimating tool. And this can actually be done in Excel. Is where you're going to gather some of the standard information. We used to have different pricing for profit and nonprofit organizations, and there were some things that were calculated based on what hosting model they had or what product they were buying from us. And then you could literally go through this tool and you could just select yes or no. And so this is kind of more of a modular approach to estimating, instead of having to create everything from scratch and everything being totally custom. And so this was, for example, every time we did a client engagement, they had to have these, at least 3 of these 4 things. It was really just asking a few questions. It didn't change. It always took us the same amount of time to set up sort of the initial project. And then as we got down further, there was a lot of custom entities or custom things that we could add. Doing this didn't eliminate the need for process design. It didn't eliminate the need for putting together a detailed project plan. But what it did do is it allowed us to automate and kind of do this pick and choose process, where we could then say, okay, we know every time we have to do a count, we have to gather the requirements, we have to do some development, we have to do some testing and some training. And so we could build out the hours, which could in turn build out our cost. And so this was just a really quick way to give, again, that sort of proposal level estimate without having to spend a ton of time understanding every single variable. If you're doing all of this estimating work up front, I have a lot of clients who say, it's too much detail, it's too much work. Why would I do that up front? I don't even know if I'm going to get the work, or I'm not. I'm not proposing that you get to the nuanced detail until you get closer maybe into this statement of work phase here. But there are some ways you can create some tools and some budgetary things. And hopefully I showed you those here that can help expedite that process for your organization. And then I'll make the argument that getting to this level of detail prior to the statement of work will change your life when it comes to the project handoff. Because when we go from the estimating and the planning into the handoff, so that the service provider can actually deliver what you said you're going to do, it is going to be life-changing for your organization. So I invite you to watch the next video where we talk about resource planning, and look at, now that we have developed these estimates and we have these details of what we're going to do, who's going to do it, we're going to look at when are they going to do it, how do we use that to manage resources, how do we use that to make hiring and firing decisions, and who's going to be on what project. So invite you to join me for the next video. Hopefully this helps you as you're doing, especially some of your process documentation, figuring out at what stage in the cycle are we doing what kind of proposal, giving you some common vernacular that you can use within your organization to talk about what's expected and what level of effort is needed in an estimate phase, and so that you can really set your team up for success in this handoff. Invite you to come back. Hopefully this was helpful. Here is my contact information. As always, if you have any questions or need any help, feel free to reach out. I really am all about driving positive change, helping your organization get better so that you can serve more people better and make a difference in this world. Thank you so much for your time today, and look forward to talking to you soon.